and welcome back to Creative Pet Keeping. My name is Kasia, I am your host, and today we are going to talk all about snails, and particularly, are they bad for your fish tank? So let's start off with the cons, so the negative aspects to having snails in your aquarium. One thing that can very quickly happen is certain snail species can reproduce very fast, and before you know it, you can be overrun with snails in your tank. Sometimes, depending on the species, it may even be very hard to notice until you check at night. One example of that would be Malaysian trumpet snails. They're oddly enough one of my favorite snails to keep, but they reproduce very quickly and they burrow in the sand, which means that during the day it's very likely that you will be like, oh cool, there's not really that much snails in my tank, until you turn on the lights at night and then you realize that you're dramatically overrun. There's like snails everywhere. It's like a horror movie. It's like a zombie invasion, but of snails, and it can be very scary. The reason why it could be scary is if there's a lot of snails. Remember, all these snails, while they're helping you eat uneaten food and they're probably munching on some algae, they're gonna have to poop, and anything that's pooping is adding to the bio load in your tank, and eventually there's going to be too much and your tank can potentially crash, because there's always a limit to how much bio load a particular tank can handle. Of course, this will depend on a couple factors, such as what kind of filtration you use, do you have a lot of plants, how many fish do you have, as well as how many water changes you perform in your tank. So that can be definitely one problem, and I'll talk about some solutions to how to manage populations or get rid of them a little later in the video. Another common problem, which more so is kind of annoying than is a problem, is snail eggs. Snail eggs can be kind of annoying. Some people don't like how they look. They can be, on the glass, laid on your plants. Nerite snails can be particularly annoying because they will lay these white, very solid eggs that get really well stuck to everything, and before you know it, you have these like specks of white all over your decorations, which is kind of really annoying because they're pretty hard to get rid of. There are certain fish that can eat the eggs off of surfaces. I've heard that loaches are pretty good at that, but it can be really annoying, and all it takes is one female Nerite snail to be able to lay a bunch of eggs on her own. Another thing that can be kind of maybe shocking is when you see mystery snails lay eggs for the first time. Maybe you might not have seen it before, because they will lay egg clutches a little bit above the surface of the water, and they look kind of creepy. If you look at it for the first time, it looks kind of like something you would see an alien kind of deposit. It looks like little baby aliens, and before you know it, you'll have like a bunch of little tiny mystery snails, which can be very problematic, especially if you have like a 10-gallon and maybe you have 2 mystery snails, and then they have a clutch of eggs, and before you know it, you have 200 little mystery snails. It can get out of hand very quickly, so it's definitely a valid concern unless you would like to breed them, which can be a very fun thing for sure. Another negative issue that you can encounter when it comes to snails is snails can get into places they should not be. Particularly, I've had this problem with Malaysian trumpet snails. Well, they will get inside of hang-on back filters and canister filters, and for some reason, I don't know why, but they like to get stuck in the propeller, and then the propeller won't be able to move, and then your filter is not working, and then you're like, oh, what's going on? I don't know what's happening, and then you have to take your filter out, take it apart, find the little snail, get it out, clean out your filter, and then everything works again, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's definitely not fun. So it's something else that may happen if you have snails. It's not all snail species that kind of get in stuff, but it seems to be that the Malaysian trumpet snails are the big troublemakers. Do you hear that? That is the sound of a snail who's trying to get into a propeller right now. So while snails can be really troublesome, they can really help out your ecosystem as well. And it's why I actually am pretty cool with keeping snails. I welcome all the snails into my tanks, and I think they are great. And here are a couple reasons why. For starters, snails will eat any uneaten fish food that your fish either haven't gotten to, maybe they were too full if you fed them a little too much, or if any food gets in between the gravel, the snails will take care of it. And that is very helpful because uneaten food can become very problematic in your fish tank. It will mess up and follow your water, it will get your ammonia to spike, and uneaten food can kill fish. So having a little snail to be your little backup, I guess, fish food Roomba, that's what I'm gonna call them, is really helpful. Another thing they can help you with is they can help manage some algae and help keep your tank clean. Overall, I feel like they're a good addition to an ecosystem that you're sort of trying to establish in your little fish tank. Also, snails can help eat any dead fish. Now this is kind of within reason. So if you have a large tank, for example, with very big fish, a lot of little tiny snails are not going to help you when the fish passes away. But if you have a tank with little tiny fish and maybe one tetra passes away and it just gets somewhere behind a lot of plants or decorations and you just can't seem to find it and are not even aware that it passed away, the snails will help out and be your cleanup crew and will help eat the poor little deceased fish, which can be a helpful thing in keeping your aquarium clean. Now, here's a really weird question. Will your betta eat a snail? And the short answer is it really depends on the betta and it depends on the type of snail that you have, but it is very possible that your betta can indeed eat a snail. Usually this applies for baby snails more so than adult snails. Adult snails have pretty good defenses. So if you plan on, for example, getting a mystery snail and it's a nice adult, it will most likely be just fine hanging out with a betta. If you want to get rid of snails, there's a couple things you can do. You can either try to fully eradicate them, you could prevent them from getting into your tank in the first place, or you can manage them. So I guess we'll start with preventing. So if you have a brand new tank, you know, you're just starting it out, setting it up, and you want to make sure that when you buy some nice plants for your aquarium, you don't want to bring in new snails because, you know, it could be a personal preference. Maybe you don't want snails. I personally like them, but you know, everyone has, you know, different opinions and different preferences, and that's totally fine. One thing that you can do to prevent snails from entering your aquarium is to use a bleach dip for your plants. It's recommended to use about 3/4 of a cup of bleach in a 1 gallon of water. You kind of dilute the bleach inside. You will dip your plants in there for roughly about like 2 minutes-ish. And then afterwards you have to rinse your plants really, really well. Another thing that you can do is buy tissue culture plants because usually those don't have any pests in them. So they're kind of a safe way to prevent snails from coming into your aquarium. If you already have a population of snails and would like to just manage them so that you have some snails, but there's not too many, one thing you can do is get some assassin snails, which is kind of weird. You have snails, there's too many snails, so to manage them, you're getting more snails. It sounds a little bit counterproductive, but assassin snails eat other snails and they're natural predators. They don't reproduce too quickly, so you don't have to worry about their population exploding too much, and they will help manage your population. If you only have a few snails, they might eat all of them, which can be a little problematic, but if you have like a really large group of snails, just pop in a couple assassin snails and over time they will help manage your population and keep it from exploding. That seems to be my personal method of managing my snails, but you can also buy snail traps. I've seen a couple really cool videos about them and that they work really well, but personally I have not used any snail traps to try to catch snails. You can also get some species of fish that will help eat snails, but sometimes that can be a little more problematic because they can eradicate your whole snail population and then they will require more snails in their diet. So you go from having snails, solving the problem of having snails, but now you need to get more snails to feed the fish that now want to eat more snails. So it can be a solution, yet a problem all at once. If you want to completely eradicate your tank from having snails, I know that some people will use chemicals to do so, but personally I would not recommend doing so. Even though a lot of companies say they are fish and shrimp safe, I just don't really trust the chemicals that are in the solutions that will kill snails. So I recommend either using assassin snails or snail traps to do so. Lastly, let's end this on a kind of silly question. but it's kind of a valid question to ask, I think, and that is, do snails bite? As someone who has been bitten by a lot of my fish, particularly my ocelotus who bite me all the time, and you can definitely check those videos out if you want to see Daniel get bit and see my tiny little aggressive fish, it is safe to know that snails will not bite you, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!